Just to get started, just before we dig into the topics that we're going to be discussing, I'll be giving you a little bit more background on Transit Equity Day and how it came about. For the past 4 years, on February 4th, a network of transit riders unions, community organizations, environmental groups, and labor unions have organized Transit Equity Day, a national day of action to commemorate the birthday of Rosa Parks by declaring that public transit is a civil right. As most of you probably know, Rosa Parks is an iconic figure of the civil rights movement who chose the tactic of refusing to give up her seat on the bus to demand an end to segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. So it's only fitting that we remember her legacy in talking about what transit should look like today and what it means to actually have transit equity. Transit is a necessity. It underlies the ability of the Chicago region to function. We all depend on transit, whether we use it or not, because it moves people to where they need to go. It moves our essential workers, which we all depend on. And we must invest in transit as part of the COVID recovery. If we don't and the system withers away, we will force people to drive as their only transportation choice. And that is not a vision of a region that we would like. Public transit is also a strategy to combat climate change, expanding non-fossil fuel. Public transportation is a foundation to achieving this transition. The recent COVID Relief Act provided only stopgap funding that will enable Chicago's transit system to continue to run at a reduced COVID level of service. It does not make transit whole. Transit must be continued to be prioritized as a key COVID recovery to help restore economic health. And we have a great panel for you today to help kind of touch on a lot of these topics and what transit equity looks like in communities across the city and region. So joining us today, we have Keith Hill, president of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 241. We have Congressman Chuy Garcia of Illinois 4th District. We have a recording by Congresswoman Robin Kelly of the 2nd District. We have Andrea Reid, the Executive Director of the Greater Roseland Chamber of Commerce and co-chair of the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric. We also have Zahir, member of the Belmont Cregan Youth Leadership Council at the Northwest Side Housing Center. And just a little bit more directions for what I mentioned earlier for closed captions. To view the English captions, click the closed caption button below. And if you are in need of Spanish captions, click the link provided in the chat below and adjust the font background and language to your preference. And adjust the size and placement of the window to allow for visibility of both captions and Zoom. So to kick us off today, we have Andrea Reid of the Greater Roseland Chamber of Commerce.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Are you asking me questions or what's happening?
Yes, we would like for you to talk a little bit more about transit equity in Roseland and what it means to you.
Okay, so again, I'm Andrea Reid, Executive Director for the Greater Roseland Chamber and co-chair for the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric. Transportation, we feel, is a major driver. Ample access of the transportation provides an opportunity for people to have access to resources that are vital to everyday normal living. The lack of transportation can adversely impact the quality of life of those who do not have access. Transportation is vitally important for everyone. And employers want to know that their employees have ample access to transportation, allowing their employees to get to and from work with ease. And I don't think any employer wants the peril of knowing that their employee can't get home after a full day of work. The lack of accessible transportation can create a barrier to employment, limiting job opportunities for a population of people who are most dependent on transportation. Transit-dependent individuals who are without access to transportation and don't have other options may resort to desperate measures to supply their daily needs, which we actually see that playing out in our society right now. This creates an environment that may not be safe alternatives, which ultimately can and does affect the safety of everyone. And in my opinion, it is inexcusable that in a major metropolitan city like Chicago, that certain geographical areas of our population have been cut off or have limited access to equitable, accessible, affordable, and seamless transportation. Unfortunately, cutting people off or limiting access can adversely affect the probability of job security, which in turn causes people to lose hope. That then transforms the mindset to a spirit of hopelessness. Desperation can lead to tragic outcomes. Due to COVID-19, essential workers depend on accessible and affordable transportation as well. And we've noted that a lot of the transit dependent, or shall we say, essential workers are transit dependent and come from the areas where transportation is not accessible. Post-COVID-19, many more will depend on equitable, accessible, affordable, and seamless transportation. The pandemic has caused many people to lose their jobs and or caused major corporations to shut down. Now, more than ever before, it is vitally important that people who are traveling from every area of our city are provided adequate access to transportation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And we'll have some time later on in the program for some questions. Since it's an hour-long program, we won't have a ton of time, but at the end, we'll probably have around 10 minutes for anyone that wants to ask questions. Thank you so much, Andrea.
You're welcome.
And next up, we have Congresswoman Robin Kelly.
Greetings, everyone. First, I'd like to give a shout out to our youth activists, including our young speaker, Zahir Menjavar. Thank you for working heart and soul to make the Chicagoland a better place. To all of you, I say, the future of our nation and our democracy is in your hands. Please do us proud. A second shout out goes to today's speaker, Andrea Reid, who is not only my constituent, but the executive director of the Greater Roseland Chamber of Commerce and co-chair of the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric. Transit Equity Day serves as a national day of action that commemorates the birthday of Rosa Parks, while reminding us that public transit is a civil right. Decades of structural racism have led to policy and investment decisions that consistently harm Black and brown people. As a result, people of color on the South and West sides and in many suburbs live with longer commute times or even a complete lack of train service, especially on the far South side. A red line extension has been promised for decades. It would serve parts of the city that have some of the highest rates of poverty and unemployment and lower numbers of car ownership, along with slow and unreliable bus service. We have rail transit service that stretches far out to the northern and western suburbs, yet it doesn't connect the South Side with the rest of Chicago, much less the region with reliable service. We must remember, transit service is a lifeline connecting people to food, healthcare, jobs, family, and cultural activities. Freedom of movement is a human right. The pandemic has made a bad situation worse. Residents facing the greatest mobility challenges are more likely to live in the areas hit hardest by the virus and less likely to be able to work from home. Even when transit ridership took a huge hit during the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of people continued to ride transit during the height of the stay-at-home order, showing the essential nature of providing affordable and reliable transit alternatives. The majority of transit riders continue to be Black and brown essential workers who need robust, reliable service to go about their lives. Our entire society and economy relies on transit because the majority of essential workers rely on transit to show up to their jobs at hospitals, grocery stores, and warehouses. Transit funding depends on riders paying fares as well as sales tax and gas tax, all of which took a tremendous hit during the pandemic. Federal support has been and will continue to be critical for transit to survive beyond this year. I have fully supported funding for transit in both stimulus packages. I will continue to work to ensure that transit agencies are not forgotten in President Biden's proposed COVID response package as we work to provide much needed relief for communities across Illinois. I will also fight for state and local funding in the next COVID response package, as well as funding specifically for transit agencies, currently proposed at $20 billion. Thank you again for inviting me here, and please know that I am in your corner.
I would thank Congresswoman Robin Kelly if she were here, but hopefully she's able to hear this later. It's always affirming to hear our political leaders uplifting transit as something that's a priority and not merely an afterthought. So next up, we'll have Zahir of the Beaumont-Cragen Youth Council from the Northwest Side Housing Center talk to us a little bit more about what transit equity means to him and his community.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zahir. I'm one of the youth within the Beaumont-Cragen Youth Leadership Council. And for me, as a youth living in the state of Chicago, transportation equity should mean that I can get to any corner of the city, anywhere in the city through public transportation if I have to. If I'm in downtown, I should be able to get home. I should be able to get to school, get to work, go to church, anywhere I need to be. I should be able to depend on the buses and the train systems of this city. And it's a shame that recently I have not been able to do so. In a pre-pandemic world, I depended on the bus system to take me to and from school every day. And I go to school across the entire city. There have been many moments where I would show to my first period class late. And there have been many moments where I would show up to work after school late. Not because I'm a poor student, not because I have poor time management, but because the buses said they would arrive at a certain time and they wouldn't arrive until a few minutes later, throwing off my entire schedule. And we've seen that with other youth in our youth program. Most of our youth attend Steinmetz High School on the Northwest Side, and they depend on the Diversity bus system to take them to work, to home, to church, and to other places. And we've noticed that last year, prior to the pandemic, a lot of them were showing up to our site late. And with that, we want to work hard to have that equity across the entire city, not just on the buses in downtown, but on the buses on the west side, the northwest side, the south side. The buses should be equal across the entire city. Everybody should be able to depend on the bus, whether they're using it once in a blue moon or every single day of the week to get to and from work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zahir. I think as somebody that grew up in Hermosa near Beaumont-Cragen, I think it really reminded me of just using the buses and why it's so important to continue to prioritize it for everyone that's using it. So next up, we'll have Keith Hill, president of ATU 241 Local Bus Operators Union.
Good afternoon, everyone. I actually wrote something out. I don't know if you see my paper, but I'm gonna talk freely. Andrea, Ms. Reid, Brother Zahir, I wanna thank you. Today is Rosa Parks' birthday. She took a stand, well, she took a seat. She refused to move out of a seat to bring forth a cause, position, a fight to make change. I agree with both of y'all strongly about what we call them is transit deserts. And it does enable minorities to move around this city in a timely fashion. You should be able to move from one spot to the next spot seamlessly. That doesn't happen in Chicago. I think it's time for us to take a stand, to take a position to fix that. Public transit should be affordable, accessible, reliable, clean, safe, and friendly. So I think it's time that we take a stand, like Rosa Parks on her day. Lip service we can no longer tolerate or take from the politicians, the powers that be. Everybody supports transit. Everybody wants transit, but they don't invest in transit. And that is the biggest downfall of transit. That's why we have transit deserts. That's why we have gaps in service. I welcome this alliance, this committee, everybody that's listening and that's involved. Transit should be a necessity for the city, for the state, for the region. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, but just like Rosa Parks took a seat, I think it's time we take a stand and stop allowing the lip service to tell everybody they support transit. Stand with transit. Plant the seed to grow transit. Let's get rid of the transit deserts. Let's put the bus stops up in all locations where everybody can move around this city, affordable, safe, and seamlessly. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Keith. So we'll have Chuy joining us around 12:30. So it looks like we have some time for a few questions. I was just looking through the chat box. If anyone has any questions. Okay. Somebody asked, Mr. Hill makes a great point that everyone does believe in transit and wants it, but not everyone invests in it. How do you all suggest we encourage people, leaders, politicians to invest in affordable, accessible transit? And anyone can address this question.
Is it okay if I do?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, don't get me wrong. When I go to the contract table and meet with the powers that be, the first thing I start my meeting off by saying is, everyone talks about Chicago has this world-class transit system. I need everybody to invest in it. We have to, and I'm not a fan of taxes. I think that reallocating tax bases, changing how things are taxed will be a great boost to transit. Not increase taxes. You know, I'm not a fan of that. You know, I think they need to reallocate and change how they pay for transit. The gas tax is wonderful. Hotel rental cars is wonderful. You know, when you build a high rise that's going to house at least 100 people, condos in it, it should be like a real estate tax. Follow the San Francisco. There's so many different models out there that that we can tap into and use. But everybody's afraid to do it, or they all say they support transit. Everybody support transit, but when we go to them and talk to them about transit deserts in their neighborhoods, in their districts, it falls on deaf ears. They give us a smile and a dance. So, you know, I just think it's time that we push them to start reallocating or restructuring the tax-based system.
I don't particularly understand why certain areas are transit, that lack transit, or as the young man stated, Keith, that we're in transit deserts. That's what we call it. And it is really unfortunate because Chicago is a major metropolitan city, and transportation should be equitable all across the city. When compared to communities north of us, I always jokingly say that you know, there's no such thing as missing a bus, because they're lined up, and you know, every 5 minutes there's a bus. I mean, they're, you know, I understand that maybe the population is greater in certain areas where there are more people, needing to get to work, but it doesn't excuse the fact that in Roseland, for example, you have the number 34 bus that if someone misses that bus, they'll miss their connection to the rapid transit line at 95th Street. And that's why we have fought so hard through the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric. And we're so happy that Metro and Tony Preckwinkle, President Tony Preckwinkle, has ignited the pilot that we pushed for. And for this 3-year pilot program, Metro is an underutilized asset in our community, but it does provide rapid transit from the south side to the loop. So we're happy that this pilot has taken place. Unfortunately, we're in a pandemic. And so the jobs are scarce. People have to lay off employees. And so ridership is down right now, and that's all across the city. But that doesn't excuse the fact that we need transportation to be equitable throughout the city of Chicago.
Another question that I saw in the Q&A box, safe for COVID. I think this question is an interesting one. How people see how the pandemic ties into the future of transit and how people view it as safe or not. Whether it's kind of backed up by any sort of research that indicates any sort of COVID spread on transit, which hasn't been shown. So I don't know if any of you have any thoughts around COVID and how that has also changed people's feelings and thoughts about transit.
Are you speaking in the form of safety?
Yeah, safety from the virus or just in general, bigger questions of like transit being something that people use as often if they're working from home, and is it seen as essential? Just differences in how the pandemic has shaped transit.
From what I have heard, the essential workers, they have to work. And even though safety is an issue, it didn't stop them from getting on that bus or train and going to work. So, we have to practice social distancing, and people should wear their mask and they should wear gloves. So probably more public awareness should be made, or information about COVID should be enforced in the areas of public transportation so that everyone is safe and it can continue to take public transportation. It's very important. And post-COVID, people are going to really need to get to work, really need jobs. So transportation is essential.
So we're gonna be moving on to our next guest, Congressman Chuy Garcia. He's gonna be offering some remarks around transit equity and his work around that.
Good afternoon to all my transit friends and allies out there, and thank you, Linda. We're about to take a vote on the floor of the House, so I had to run back to my office, but glad to do so. Thank you all. I know I said it last year, but I'm going to say it again. Public transit is not an option. Public transit is a lifeline. In fact, transit is equity and are calling for transit justice. Here in Chicago, or there in Chicago, our public transit is more than just a mode of transportation. It is a part of who we are. It is a part of our identity, and it shapes our daily life. For many, it's the only way to and from work, school, or healthcare. Yet for too long, we've let our transit systems fall into great disrepair. But that time is over. Together, we will challenge the status quo and breathe new life and bring new funding into our transit system. Together, we will fight to invest in transit like we've never seen before. The truth is that transportation policy is an essential component of any strategy to address racial, social, and economic inequality in our society. Quite literally, transportation policy creates or tears down, sorry about the noise from my colleagues here, physical barriers and avenues to opportunity for working class people, especially minorities, community. Access to public transportation is not an option. It is a lifeline for school-age children, for working parents, and even the elderly. Public transit isn't an option. It's a lifeline. For frontline essential workers who are keeping us alive and our economy running during this pandemic, public transit isn't an option. It is a lifeline. We have, for too long, allowed cars to be the focus of how our cities are developed. We've seen highways and big avenues cut up Latino and Black communities. We've let working people get physically separated from jobs, schools, and healthcare. For working class communities like those on the northwest and southwest sides of Chicago, public transit isn't an option, it's a lifeline. Last year, we fought to get $25 billion in transit for the CARES Act. They said no, but we succeeded. In HEROES, a bill from last spring, I fought for $32 billion, and though we didn't get it all, we got $32 billion in HEROES and $14 billion into law. We won't take no for an answer, and we will make sure that transit gets the funding that it needs. We need significant funding for transit in the next COVID stimulus, and we need to pass a major national infrastructure bill to fix our crumbling roads and bridges, create thousands of good-paying union jobs, and build our economy back better. It's why I fought to create the Office of Transit Supportive Communities, so we finally acknowledge and combat gentrification. This new office would make transit-oriented development more equitable and finally incentivize the construction of affordable homes near transit, not just luxury apartments that drive our people out. It's also why I fought to change the very methods and used to determine connectivity and access. Believe it or not, bike, pedestrian, and transit alternatives aren't currently used to determine the effectiveness of a current road. The result? Cities widen roads and increase speed limits before they even consider adding transit or pedestrian options. Still, if we do not fix the 80-20 split where highways get 80% of the funding and public transit is left with a measly 20%, we're going to continue to see our public transit systems fail and not receive the investment they need to operate and grow. That's why I plan to introduce the Transit Equity Resolution to move away from the flawed 80-20 split and move towards an equitable and fair split, because public transit isn't an option, it's a lifeline. Frontline transit workers have kept our trains running, and they get up every day and get the job done. Now it's time for Congress to do the same. Together, we can save public transit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Garcia. I'm not sure if you have any time to spare for a few questions.
I've got to run to the floor. Yeah, my chief here is saying, nope, you got to go. Thank you so much. Sorry, I can't.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Okay, let's go. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Great. So that concludes our formal remarks from our panelists. So we're going to be transitioning into a longer Q&A session. So I'll just take a look again at the Q&A box, and if others have questions, be sure to add them to the Q&A box. Some of these are to Congressman Garcia, which I can't answer on his behalf. Or if any of the panelists want to offer some comments based on some of the things that you've heard, or any kind of questions that you have or comments. I want to offer you space to do that. Okay, there's one question. How can we better organize to win more funding for transit?
Good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah, how do we? We're doing everything we can. Our fight is not over as far as the coalition. We're excited again, as I stated earlier, about the pilot program. However, we need everyone on board. Unfortunately, the city of Chicago is not on board yet. So we will continue to push. And I think that the cry has to be a little louder. I think sometimes in our communities, people have the mindset of it is what it is, and that there's nothing they could do about it. But people don't realize that their voice, especially with our elected officials, we elect them to carry our voice. And so I think our voices need to be a little louder, and not in a aggressive, I don't even know the word I want to say, but I think in a constructive, well thought out plan, our voices can be heard. And that's the way we need to approach the situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what we saw with the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric, that it took a long time, but there have been some successes. And I think part of it, like you said, was about being louder. I think in the last 2 years, there was just a lot of attention to that issue. But it took a long time too.
Yeah, well, we have to be constructive and not disruptive.
Yes, going off of what Andrea said about the elected officials, I think one of our priorities should be, how can we meet with our aldermen, our local officials? Can we get them to allocate funds out of their menu money for bike lanes? And regarding to the bus lanes, can we get a meeting with CTA? Can they promise us that they will do a survey on certain bus lanes that are struggling to arrive on time? I think, as Andrea said, we elect them. We vote for our aldermen, we vote for our senators. I think we should be pushing them to allocate funds and to give us verbal agreements to help us to for the bike lanes and for the buses.
I saw a raised hand.
I'm sorry,
President
that
Hill?
was me. Yeah. I want to shed some light, especially on something that Brother Zahir just said. If you driving a bus is not an easy task. Getting down the street is not an easy task. You got many obstacles. You got people, cars, construction. Bikes is a killer, because even though I support bikes and I'm a cyclist, they don't respect the rules of the roads, and it hinders what we have to do. So getting down the street on time, we have a ton of obstacles in our way. Safety is number one. We're not gonna rush or try to race a bike, race a car, race a truck, or jump around a construction person and put ourselves in risk for an accident. So when a bus arrives late, I'm asking the panel, those that take public transportation, it's a lot that the bus have to go through, the driver has to go through. And that's just outside the bus. I haven't even got to the problems on the bus. You know, how we are a babysitter, a doctor, a lawyer, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a counselor, a policeman. You know, we have so much going on. Sometimes it's difficult for us to maintain that schedule. Funding, Representative Garcia said it best, both at the state level and at the federal level, that funding ratio needs to be adjusted. It needs to be either equal or close to equal. So it has to be a major push on getting that adjusted. And on the federal level, it's not just for Chicago, it's for all public transportation throughout the United States. Because everyone has said it, it's a necessity. It's a way to get around. You know, right now, you have a lot of people driving cars that should not be driving. They should be a passenger on a bus. And the reason why they are driving is because that's the only alternative that they probably have, or it's easier for them. So you have to make transit more reliable, more accessible, more affordable. And all the agencies have to parallel and work together. I'm good. I'm glad I haven't seen him in a long time. And I apologize for not reaching out to him since I've taken office. But my good friend, Senator Dillard, over the RTA, I'm glad to see him. He's on here. He's a big transit advocate. Helped us out along in a lot of transit issues. So I look forward to reaching out to him, sitting down with him. And great man, great mindset, great mind, great advocate for us. But all the agencies need to work better together to make transit throughout all regions, whether it's Cook, Will, DePage. You should be able to go to Cook all the way to Will with no problem. You should be able to go from the end of Cook County all the way to the end of DePage with no problem in a timely fashion. So it's a lot of work that got to be done. But before you start laying the groundwork, it's two things that I think that you have to do. You have to fight to change the funding ratio on the state level and the federal level. And then you have to get a dedicated tax base for all transit to sustain, grow, and move around to make it to where it can be used. And then, you know, we can't forget COVID has changed our life. The way COVID has brought a drastic change on how we move forward in life. So whether it's Metro, Pace, or CTA, you're going to need an enhancement of services to keep the crowded buses from being overcrowded and to respect everybody's personal space while they're on public transportation. So, you know, I welcome this committee. Anything I could do to help anybody or anything you need from this union, just let us know. We're here to back you because you're helping us with our cause. So we're here to help. I guess I saw somebody ask a question and I wanted to answer it, but I don't remember what the question was now. I'm not old, I'm just got a lot going on today, so forgive me, but I'm gonna look through the comments and see if I can. Somebody asked about transit. I do want to answer this one. Somebody asked what state has transit right. Me being well-traveled, whether it's military or personal, going across seas and in the United States, I can't say Chicago, whether it's a bus, car, or train, has a very well laid out way to move around this city. So I think we are close to right. We're not at right. But if you go to Boston, if you go to New York, you pay too much just to get from one side to the other side. You know, it's crazy. You know, same thing in LA, it's crazy. So Chicago, I can't say is on the right path to having it right. You know, and that world-class transit, I do want it. And I want it for the whole region, not just for the buses, for the whole region. So with that being said, I'll be quiet now because I could talk all day.
We had a question in the Q&A box for Zahir. What support do youth need to advocate for better transit more effectively? And generally, what's been your experience of potentially being like your youngest person in some rooms and trying to improve transit in your community?
Oh yeah, well, being the youngest person in some of these rooms youth elected officials. It can be hard, you know, because sometimes you just feel like they're just looking at you like, oh, you're just a high schooler, you know, what do you know? But we've done a lot of work. We've met with all three aldermen that represent our neighborhood, the 30th Ward, 31st Ward, and 36th. We've met with some state senators and federal senators. Our goal, what we want to do is keep being persistent. You know, we understand that there's many factors that go into the installation of bike lanes and the installation of dedicated bus lanes in the city. We know that there's a lot of work that goes into it, but we want to get the ball rolling so it develops into something bigger and better. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Another question. Let's see. How do you bring in other conversations into a conversation on transit equity, such as food deserts, food apartheid? I know Active Trans also had an event recently around food insecurity and how that ties into transit. Not sure if anyone had any comments on that.
I do it. All that goes hand in hand. You got to start at your alderman levels. Your alderman pick what company. Your alderman can say what stores, what company, what goes on in their district. They don't. They approve the stores and everything. So that's a grassroots at the city level. You know, the transit desert, that should be a no-brainer. You know, it's. I drove Madison for 15 years. I'm not even gonna use Madison. I'm gonna use when I left the west side, went to the south side. I drove Ashland for 15 years. So I'm gonna use the number. I drove Ashland, so I'm gonna use the number 9. You got a Jewel food store on 95th in Ashland, and I'm just going down a busy main street. You got a Food for Less on 71st, and then from 71st to actually, I want to say it's Diversity. You have no grocery stores on that main street. Now you have a lot of little, like a fruit market, a meat market, but no at-home grocery store, one-stop grocery store. That's the stuff that need to be addressed in minorities communities especially. But we have to start at the alderman level and push. The last time that I was part of a push is when Mariano's, when the Jewel and Dominic started closing, and the Marianos stepped up and invested in certain communities, and so did Whole Food. We have to push for more stores to invest, and the aldermen to bring them into the community to invest. So it has to start at the grassroots, and I think that's something that we need to do at a city level.
Our last question before we transition into the action alert. For Andrea, what does your organizing look like in Roseland? What would be helpful?
I just saw that question and I was going to try to answer it. Right now, we are really in a very good place as far as organizing. We have Invest Southwest. We were selected as I'm one of the corridor managers for the corridor for Michigan Avenue and 111th Street. We have the Pullman Center that's going to be opening up in September. We have the Red Line Extension project that's going on. That's going to answer a lot of transit problems that we have here on the south side. The train line will go from 103rd all the way out to Altgeld, which is beautiful. The only challenge with that is that the project won't be completed until 2029. And I jokingly say by that time I will be retired to my palm tree and lifetime of pina coladas. So I don't know if I'll be around to see it. I hope I will. I also wanted to respond to something that Keith said about the transit equity issue. Metropolitan Planning Council did a study entitled "The Cost of Segregation," when he was stating that transportation should go, all throughout Cook County and, all through the city of Chicago. The cost of segregation woke me up to the fact that there are barriers and there are reasons why transportation does not go throughout our entire city. Unfortunately, the powers that be, or whoever they were, decided to cut transportation off for certain areas. And I believe that the result that we have now with the crime that goes on in our city, the people that thought they could cut certain populations off from access are learning that people still know how to get to where they need to go. I've heard people say on the North Shore that they pay a lot of money in taxes. So they didn't think that they should experience crime. But when you look at the disparity in the communities, in certain communities that have been cut off from access to resources, jobs, development, Roseland is one of those areas. Fortunately, we are on the upswing and we are doing a lot of work to transform our community. But we have suffered years of disinvestment. Our community has been grossly overlooked for everything for a very long time. And so trouble doesn't sit still. Trouble knows how to move around. And so when you look at north of us, again, there's a plethora of everything from restaurants, cafes, beautiful sidewalk, planters everywhere. I mean, it's beautiful when you go in certain areas, but then when you come back to certain areas on the south side and the west side, all you see are empty lots and dirt lots. And, there's a lot of lack of food choices, no restaurants. At a certain point, people begin to just put on the, it's the war paint time. And it's like every man for himself. So, I really believe that it behooves all of us to care about how every community looks, because trouble knows how to move around. And until it's not like, well, I can just shelter myself off and have all of these amenities and forget about my neighbor. That's not how it works. And so again, the challenge of transportation is not just the problem of the people that lack transportation. The problem of transportation and equitable services throughout the city is everybody's problem. And we are our brother's keeper. And so we need to be conscious of that as a city and as a county.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Those are good remarks to close us out. I think it's important to remember that transportation has the potential to connect us or keep us disconnected. And I think what you said is a testament to that, how even if you have decent transit service in your community, like what does it mean that large portions of our city, Black and Brown communities, don't have the best access to transit service? So I think that's really key to keep in mind, particularly on Transit Equity Day, and also like just the historical basis of the day around Rosa Parks' legacy and what she fought for and how transit was a big part of that. So we're coming close to the end of our program. To close us out, Julia will be leading us through an action alert.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for our amazing panelists, Congresswoman Robin Kelly, Congressman Chuy Garcia. We're so grateful to have you be part of this conversation and part of the daily work it takes to really move the needle on transit equity. So we now want to invite all of you to take action with us. The road ahead is long, and so we need to stay informed. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and what you see here on the screen is if you join us in taking action right now, we'll see pins dropping. So that's what we want to see. So why are we taking action today? We want to thank our amazing congressional representatives from Illinois who have supported and voted for transit funding in the first two federal relief packages in 2020. So we want to thank them, and then looking ahead, we want to encourage them to really change the federal funding paradigm. So since the 1980s, federal transportation funding, 80% of it has gone to highways and only 20% to transit. Now that's not equitable, right? So we're asking for 50-50 funding split, which is what Congressman Garcia was talking about, his transit parity resolution that he'll be introducing. So that's one piece of the puzzle. And the other piece is not just funding capital projects, right? So building more rail or buying more buses, we need that, but we also need dollars for operating, for more service. So that is a major key to equity. More frequency means people have the freedom of movement that they need to get everywhere they need to go. So we're seeing a couple pins dropping. This is exciting. How about a few more people? Let's see some more pins. We want to say thank you, and we want to acknowledge how much more work needs to be done with regards to the federal funding formulas. So thank you. This is so exciting to see all these pins.
I still want to figure out how to add action music to this section.
We can always improve our production quality, but you know, there's always next time.
But as we close out, I just want to make sure we thank Andrea, Zahir, President Hill, Congressman Garcia, and Congresswoman Robin Kelly for their remarks. I learned a lot today. And feel that it's a good way to honor Rosa Parks and think moving forward, like what transit equity means to our community and our city and region.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for bearing with us, for being a part of this community. We need each and every one of you in this fight with us. So be in touch, and we'll have plenty more opportunities to take action in the future.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks, President Hill.
Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, Zahir.
Thank you all.